I was about 2 the last time I saw him. He went down somewhere in the Palau Islands, wherever that was. And the Japanese had probably picked him up, but that was about it. He went down to the Palau Islands, and it's, that's doesn't pin it down very good.
I actually got involved in these searches as a result of finding a wing of a B-24. I asked the guide, where did the wing come from, and he said he didn't know. I asked him what happened to the crew, and he says he didn't know. Somebody died. It was very clear you can't have this kind of catastrophic failure without death. And the scene just overwhelmed me. These men died just as much a death as all of our warriors who die trying to protect our country, and I didn't be forgotten.
The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you that your son, Arthur Carl Miller, Aviation Radioman, First Class, United States Navy, is missing in action 13th September 1944 in the performance of his duty and in the service of his country. The department appreciates your great anxiety, but details not now available and delay in receipt thereof must necessarily be expected. To prevent possible aid to our enemies, please do not divulge. Must have been a fun thing for a mother to get. So when I think of my father, this is what I had to work with. I'm just going to start taking out a few things here because I haven't looked into this box very often myself.
I discovered that there were many planes that have gone missing in action in that part of the world during World War II. And I've simply made it an important part of my life to figure out what happened to as many of those airmen as possible.
I had heard that he was looking for the airplanes, and at first I thought it was just about finding the metal, and then I found out it was really about finding the people, and that was intriguing, to go and try and find the historical clues that can find somebody who never came home from the war.
Up here, we have a number. We have a number. We're gonna figure out whose plane this is.
Yeah.
There were more than 200 aircraft that were lost. Very crudely, I would say more than half of these might have M.I.A.s associated with them. So we have this sort of mixed joy. We found something, but it's somebody's gravesite. So if that's the hell diver, we'll be able to identify whether it's the crew of Houston and Freeman.
Well, they feel like they were forgotten. And it takes somebody from today to go back there and try to finish rewriting the history books on what happened to these men.
Our mission really is solemn. You know, this is a small battlefield in the scope of World War II, but it's our way of specifically doing something to say thank you to these families.
I used to think when I was younger that he lost his memory and he was someplace and would get his memory back and come home. That's what I believed, which was stupid, but you know, kept me going. He played the guitar and he sang, and his favorite song was "You Are My Sunshine." I remember that. We had a really happy, close-knit family, and I remember he went in the Navy. That impressed me, and I just idolized him, you know, my older brother. We had so many conflicting stories that you got so you didn't believe anything. He was missing in action, and then after a year, they declared him dead. But they didn't have any, supposedly any remains then. 2 years later, they said they had a body. 4 years later, they were going to ship a body home. My mother said, "It's someone's son and I will take care of him." And we just left it at that. It was hard for me because I was young and I had questions, but they didn't want to talk about it. So we didn't talk about it. But she was very dedicated. We went to the cemetery a lot. Whoever it was, she was going to take care of him.
In the late summer of 1944, the Allied advance in the Western Pacific pointed to a quickening schedule of invasions. Morotai and the Halmahera group was an obvious target on the drive from New Guinea. On the right flank of that route lay Palau, only 1,500 miles from Tokyo. To the top strategists of the Pacific War, the problem was, must heavily defended Palau be taken? General MacArthur, intent on retaking the Philippines, felt that Palau must be seized to provide a base from which air cover could be furnished for the Philippine operation. Admiral Nimitz agreed. Admiral Halsey, on the other hand, felt that the Palau campaign was not really necessary. Halsey recommended that Palau be bypassed, a recommendation which was not followed by his superiors. On September 15, 1944, the assault was begun on Palau Island.
He didn't know that he had a son. So he was killed before anybody told him that my mother was pregnant. My mother and my father met. It was probably some kind of an infatuation. Got carried away and I got conceived. And the truth of the matter is they weren't married. I'm in possession of a little black book of his which indicates that he had several girlfriends. Like the old cliche, a sailor has a girlfriend in every port. Well, this sailor did. So with that in mind, you kind of ask yourself, well, what kind of feelings did he really have for my mother besides lust? what kind of a person was he for real? And do I really want to know this, what kind of a person he was? You know what I mean?
There comes a moment where you go around a bend or you push aside a branch and there's something. It's a hunk of metal of some kind, and what we are immediately looking for is some way to first identify the type, and then secondly to identify a specific aircraft.
Well, it's not that we're not looking for bones, because that's really the mission of the bent prop, is to bring the men home. But we are not out there to actually do the recovery. We leave that to the official government searchers. So we just like to dust around the area enough because we want to be able to make an identification.
Would this be the wing root, you think? With this,
Man, if this is a wing root, this plane was blown out of the sky.
but look at how it's got this plate right here.
I mean, there's so many unanswered questions when we first find something. How many people were missing from this wreckage? Was it really an M.I.A. crash or not? It's just an evolving story.
Aha!
See, that's still the inside of it.
Yeah,
Look, gun port.
gun, yep.
That's the exhaust. This
Yeah.
is the bottom of the wing.
That's the bottom.
But here's a picture of him here. He looks about 17, and just so vulnerable in this. It just breaks me up every time I see it. He got his pilot's license, and I have some letters from him talking about flying low, buzzing the top of cars who were down on the highways, and they practically ran off the road. That was the kind of guy he was.
In our family, there had always been a missing uncle. All my life, I knew about it, and everybody knew about it, and nobody really knew what happened.
Well, he was killed in September of '44, and then the next year, of course, it was over. So I was always sorry he hadn't lasted a few more months.
For my mother, she had always missed her brother so much she could hardly talk about him. Whenever she did, she would start crying.
Well, I'm very much against any wars where all these young men get killed. When you hear this casualty report, too, it always puts me in a bad mood, and I just think it shouldn't happen. It's just so hard to get over. You don't get over something like that. It stays with you, and
I don't really know. But why else would you have a screen going into a gauge and it's got something else going in here?
That's definitely an adjuster now, don't you think?
Quite possibly.
We found a little piece of airplane.
That crash pattern, the wreckage was scattered all over Pope's Ridge. For days we hiked and found different pieces of it and trying to put the puzzle together about which way it flew and how it was hit and where it impacted the ground.
So this plane came in and was hit by an enormous amount of firepower. You can see one of the propellers here. Clearly there are bullet holes. So what we need to be looking for is the rest of the plane behind us. We have something here. This is a wing, and it's blue and white. I think we should look around a little more.
Yo, Flipper, I think we have a wing back here.
Give us a sound check.
It has a star and a bar on it over here. So the star is here. That's the bar. This is the star.
You have almost a straight line with none of that circular cutout. I'm assuming that circular cutout there is a part of a wheel well. Doesn't have to be.
Is that big enough to be what we saw in the cave?
It is showing this leading edge device like we've got there.
Yeah.
You can see there's a plate, safety wired on at the top, and it's got some numbers and letters on it. It might be the engine serial number, because it's not, it says L140839. There's another number here that I can't really make out. This is not a Helldiver. This is the TBM-1C Avenger.
What's the identifying piece?
It says airplane model TBM-1C. Does that do it? This is an Avenger? Well, that's an all-new ball game. It was when we figured out that this is an Avenger. Okay, now whose Avenger is it? We knew from the number who the crew was. From there, we knew that they were missing in action.
Yeah, I had no idea that anyone was even out there looking. So we were lucky in that it had identifying numbers and they could put the pieces together.
It is likely that somewhere below us are the remains of 3 airmen, an aviator and 2 crewmen who died when this plane crashed into the hill.
It brings a closeness that you never had before. And always had that uncertainty of not knowing, you know, and wanting to know, but never thinking you were going to be able to know.
Well, actually, they called my ex-wife. And I got a phone call from her saying, "Don, you're never going to believe what happened. Are you sitting down?" She said, "They think they found your uncle." And I, what? And at that moment, everything just sort of ceased for me. I was sort of in shock.
It's kind of a closure. Although I must say, it will never be a closure for me because I'm not willing to let him go.
It's not a situation with me that, oh, really, my father, you know, oh, you've discovered him. Now I've got more information, so now I'm going to look more into what may still be salvageable from my family tree. This will actually help, this is hard to say, bring some closure. I'm going to take a break.
I can't believe we're standing here. Very surreal.
Well, that's something we've heard about all our lives.
Have you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was named after him.
Yes.
I was supposed to be just like him as I was growing up. And to be standing here in a mountain in Palau.
Looking at it.
Yeah.
We've located 15 M.I.A.s out of maybe a total of 70 recoverable M.I.A.s. The question is how many as a practical matter that we'll ever find. Well, the answer is we don't know. We're just going to keep looking. The two most frequent questions is who pays for this, and are you doing this because of a family member who's missing in action? And they're about 50-50. Both of those questions come out very frequently. And so I give them just the wrong answers every time. You know, we pay for it ourselves, and no, there isn't anybody. We're doing this because we're grateful for, we want to say thank you. The shape of the propeller, the way that the propeller is bent back, suggests that the plane hit the ground at a relatively shallow angle and probably penetrated through jungle. If it was pulled out of the water, it's not the B-24. Then it's a matter of being an Avenger or a Corsair. The greatest likelihood on a probability basis is that this is the plane of Quincy Nelson. And this may be as much as we find.
Well, he was always so happy that he was a pilot, and he really did. He loved to fly. I'd received letters that he was going to be home within a week or so. The doorbell rang, and it was a man with a telegram. And I called to my mother and I said, "This is from Quint, telling me where to meet him." And I opened it up, and it said that he'd been killed. It had been reported that they had seen a big flash where he obviously went down, but that's about all they knew.
The first communication was that he was killed in action. I never quite understood how you could reach that conclusion. My sense is my mother couldn't quite understand that either.
Yes, I absolutely sort of refused to believe this as time went on, thinking, well, they've never found him, so he could be a prisoner or he could be alive. I did not remarry for 10 years after that.
You know, there's always that hope that perhaps there'd been some mistake and perhaps he had somehow gotten out of the airplane and someday he'd come walking out of the jungle.
Jim was born in Mojave. He was sort of a special boy. We were very close. And then, so he was only about 4 months old when Quint left. He knew from conversations, he just knew his father had died in the service.
You know, as I was born in February, and he went overseas in June. So this was sometime in that interim. Well, my father was just a terrific athlete. He lettered in each sport 3 times, and he was the captain of each of the teams. He was a campus leader. He was just an extraordinary person that, frankly, served as a great example to me as I was growing up. You know, let's face it, he's my hero.
Somebody told us 18.
Met Pat as a result of a very interesting coincidence. I was playing golf in northern Minnesota with an old friend of mine.
And they started talking, and he said, you know, I never asked, what'd you do in the war? And the old codger that he was playing golf with says, well, I was a Marine in the war. He goes, well, my dad was a Marine in the war.
And he said he had flown out of an airstrip on Palau.
And then Jim asked him what kind of airplane. Oh, I flew Corsairs. My dad flew Corsairs. And then the guy says, Quintus Nelson? That's my dad. And you need to call this guy Pat Scannon. He's looking for your father.
I remember the day distinctly. I got this call from Jim, and it went something along the lines of, well, I don't know exactly why I'm calling you.
And he said, well, I know why you're calling me. And I said, why is that? He said, well, I've been looking for your father's airplane for 7 years.
And he was speechless.
You could have knocked me over with a feather. I mean, it was just totally out of the blue. He said, you know, it's just amazing that your father's plane has not been found. There's no question that it is within a mile or so of the major population center in the country of Palau.
Based on where it went down, there just wasn't a whole lot of places it could hide.
3-4 months later, I was in Palau. The goal I had was to find my father's plane and to bring him home.
Is it in an open field?
There's 2 on the...
Is it on a coral head?
On the edge of the mainland.
Oh, there's a wing on the mainland?
No, between the mainland and the rock island over here.
There's something in
Most of the people in Palau have some story about some airplane that they know where it is. We had some very, very good leads, and I was very, very hopeful when I got there that we had a good chance of finding his plane. I did recall that an uncle of mine met with some of my father's squadron members and had written my mother with a very crudely drawn map and saying, here's where I think the airplane is. We used that as a frame of reference when we were there.
Now the problem is, which north is north? Because that's an island and this is an island. Or they might have considered this as one contiguous island.
The one thing that I was always mystified about is how can you lose an airplane in Palau? It wasn't until I got to Palau before I discovered why it is you can lose an airplane very easily. Many of those islands, if not the vast majority of those islands, are uninhabited and virtually impenetrable.
It was the worst jungle I've ever been in. But you know, in spite of that, we just kept going. What the amazing thing is that we didn't turn around.
We spent perhaps 8 hours going through the jungle. And according to our GPS, in that 8-hour period, we'd covered about a quarter of a mile.
What was that, about quarter mile per hour?
When we went to Palau, the first stop that we made was Tanji's museum. Tanji had basically picked up battlefield artifacts, and there were some newspaper clippings in there and so forth and so on that Tanji had pieced together. And as I'm walking out the door, I see this photograph on the wall. And right in the middle of the photograph was my father.
Looks like you.
What do you think?
I think so. I can definitely see the resemblance.
And that hit me like a ton of bricks. You know, here you are in a one-car garage in the middle of the South Pacific, and you're on the kind of mission I'm on, and all of a sudden, bang, there's a picture of your father. I've since sent Tanji a frame for that photograph. The realization hit me that we were going to have to get real lucky.
It's 12:30 and we are about to go into the interior of a small rock island where some young men have said there's some aircraft parts, wings, motor. We're gonna go take a look and see what's there. The composite of data suggested that the plane had crashed on one of the nearby coral islands.
We looked other places, and whenever we would run into blocking points, not knowing where to go, we'd go back to that island for a couple hours and spend time.
We called it Hell Island because it's just such godforsaken, god-ugly jungle that it's tough. We came out pooped, tired, whipped every single day.
I would say we put in 8, 9 days.
What is this? See, this doesn't look World War II for some reason. I don't know. I think it's just too dense.
I had pretty much concluded that we probably weren't going to find it. And, you know, that's a goal that, unfortunately, we're going to be short of. That was important to me. This was the anniversary of the day my father had been shot down, and there wasn't a memorial service for my father.
At this time, we would like...
I just refused to have one because I felt it was saying, well, he is gone. I wasn't going to admit that he was gone.
And then after a period of time passed, it didn't seem appropriate to have a memorial service. And so I think unbeknownst to Pat and the vent prop crew, that this was it.
Sir, on behalf of the great formation, please accept this flag as a symbol of your father's selfless sacrifice to our nation.
We looked for Quintus's plane, and we used the best available information. And in fact, our information was pretty good. It's just that we looked in all the wrong places. And that's not unusual. We look on the average, 2 to 10 years before we will find the plane that we're looking for. Is there a way to remember exactly where it crashed relative to the mangroves?
About 200 meters away from the land.
200 meters?
Yeah, from the shoreline.
From the shoreline in?
When I first met him, I didn't really have a good impression. I thought it's only customer like everybody. The first day, I was sitting on the boat and watching them, what are they doing.
Which way are we going to go? We're going to go the same way we went last time?
Yeah. Up to my mind, I think they've been diving all over the place and they don't find airplane and they keep on coming here. And we spent 8 days in same area.
There is a lot of junk in this harbor. There used to be a 57 Chevrolet here someplace.
I didn't tell them, but when they left, I thought maybe those guys are a little bit crazy or what.
Joe wasn't exactly sure what we were doing, but there came a moment several years into this when they finally figured out that we weren't there for vacation.
The second year, we start to discover all wreckage, and they check the numbers and they tell me the names. That's the time I realized they were doing something which is really interesting.
What I didn't know until Joe explained it to me is that Palauans feel it is very important to honor and bury their dead. In fact, it was Joe who started discussing crash sites as tombstones, and really not caring so much about the stone. It's what's near the stone or under the stone. It's the remains, and those remains are important to Palauans.
Back in those times, everybody went and everybody did their part. We didn't burn draft cards and those kind of things back then. You just did what you needed to do, and some of them didn't come back. And, that's just the way it was. You were proud of them for what they did. The Parade magazine came out with an article about Pat and the Bent Prop Group.
I said, we've got to contact him and just tell him that if he ever came across that plane, that there is family out there.
Of course, we didn't get him. I think he got about 1,000 calls on that thing.
When Pat called, I told him, I said, my husband and I just wanted you to know his dad went down on September 1st between Palau and Karora, and that's where he stopped me. And then he said, and the pilot was, and he told me information that we didn't even know. And goosebumps. I still get goosebumps talking about it.
You go through all your entire life, never really expecting to know any more than you did when you were 6 years old. And then he comes along and says, we're looking for it. Well, it's a whole, burst of hope comes out of you there, or into you, whatever it is. And I think everybody on that plane got a letter that was the same thing that said, plane went down, 3 parachutes opened up, Japanese came out and got them. We don't know who they are, but they weren't your relatives. So nobody knew who got off the plane. Until I met Pat Scanlon, I didn't know who had gotten off the plane.
Those parachutes probably were the cause of a great deal of torment for the family members of all of the crew of the B-24, because if you know it's an 11-member crew, you see 3 parachutes, well, whose parachutes were they?
Thank you.
We have no direct account, no witness, American witness at least, that can help us in our searches. But we have actual sightings by Palauans. When you saw the plane get shot down, where were you?
I was on the hill of M.I.A.s.
Oh, at M.I.A.s.
Yeah, I was on my way home to see my parents, and it becomes so, harsh. I can, from Japanese shooting up the plane, and the plane was bombing Koror, and Koror was smoke and fire only see. And then all of a sudden I saw the plane, one of the big B-52 or
B-24.
B-24, yeah. And I saw people coming with it. I think they parachuted down.
Oh, you saw the parachutes?
Yeah.
Do you remember how many?
Yeah, I think I saw 3. But I was afraid, but I couldn't, I just...
They were just scared. They scared. When they hear the American airplane, everybody take cover and the bomb explode. They never saw a bomb.
It was a post day, the airplane, American airplane came. So yeah, we thought they were Japanese. We call them Mikata. Mikata means friend, our friend.
What happened to these prisoners when you saw them?
I saw them led into the headquarters of Japanese military police.
In Napang?
Yeah, in Napang, in the jungle.
When they drove off, how many Japanese were in the car with them? Now that we know that there were POWs and that these POWs were not ever recovered, this now changes the approach, if you will, the tactics that we use to try to find missing in action prisoners of war. I went to Japan to interview former Japanese officers to expand our knowledge base.
普通のところをね、こうなんだ大きな穴を掘ってね、命令を受けたということは本人にこれ要するに兵隊さんがね、偉いね、確かに偉いよ。
だけど抗議したんでしょ？
いや抗議してっていうのはそんなのおかしいじゃないかって言ってね。言ったんじゃないですか。それは私言葉は分かんないからね、こうやってやってるでしょ、そこをこれ首跳ねちゃったんですよね、ここで。でカフマンさんのお墓のところにね、前を通った時はいつもそこでこうやっぱりやってきました。本当に申し訳なかったってことをね。それからお母さんが来られた時もね。
でも戦争中ですもんね。
いやいやそれね、どうも なんかね、もう少し人間的な常識があればね。
The three men that parachuted out, one was a gunner, one was a photographer, and one was a up in the nose. I believe he was the bombardier. We know they made it to a village there, and from there we lose track. We're at what WWII calls the general's house, but there is something in this area that was referred to as the command post. There's another one. There is some belief that there were Americans executed in this area, so at a minimum, we want to document the site. That's interesting.
When I was little, I'm sure I thought of flying in the plane and shooting the guns, and I probably had a very poor attitude towards Japanese people. They took my daddy. And as you get older, you learn more. I don't hold any animosity to those people now.
Tommy had very little connection with his dad. His mother didn't speak of his father much. If you asked her a pointed question, when he went down, when they got married, she would answer that.
I know that she had at least one opportunity to get married. I know there was a guy that wanted to marry her. And I don't know whether it was just that she never thought she could love somebody else, or if deep down there was that lingering hope that maybe someday he was going to show up. I really don't know. It's one of those things she didn't talk about a lot.
We've had all of the letters that she had written to him, that he had written back to her. Can be a pretty nosy person, I guess, and I started reading the letters. And see, there's two layers. This one is from New Guinea, August 31st, 1944, the day before the flight. Dear Precious, just a few lines for you. I love you too much to sleep without saying goodnight. Didn't hear from you or any of the folks, but I expect tomorrow will bring me several. Sweet, my mind is nearly a blank tonight, for I am all took up with thoughts of you and home, and maybe it won't be too long until the day when I will be home and we will be together again. With your arms around me, I can forget all of this and settle down to spending years with you. Sweet darling, tomorrow is a busy day, and I have to get up early, so I'll stop for tonight, and tomorrow I'll do better. But you know I love you with all of my heart, and will for always. Tell the folks hello, and write as often as you can. Good night, sweetheart. With all of my love, Jimmy. You have to think that if there'd been any way that he could have gotten home, he would have come home.
It makes sense that the road is right down there. If they could have pulled off the road.
We know they were taken to an execution site, but we don't know the exact location. So we rely on primarily Palauan recollections, and the elders have been amazingly helpful.
Awat yakit. Aknar tiang. And she said that they passed by that remain of the building, the concrete building, and then they passed by that and come toward here, and there was this small wooden house here.
Down here?
When
Closer.
He said it's very hard to see the personnel during that time.
Yeah.
Because while they're moving them, they all cover.
What, you mean they had something on their head?
Yeah.
Like a hood?
Hood or something like that. Only thing he heard is they moved them up to the area, and he doesn't know where they
But are we talking about the 3 prisoners?
Yeah. The people of Palau are not really like the other countries, which is big countries. They were writing on the history and what and what. The people of Palau were just passing the history by words, generation and generation.
Oh, is it at where we were with Catalina?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be.
Could be.
Could be. But relatively speaking, we would be talking about police station, police cemetery. Pretty damn good.
Good EPS.
That's exactly right.
Somewhere around. Somewhere around.
Okay, we could even get a compass bearing. He was pointing in this general direction and somewhere about 50 to 100 meters above the river. And just as a point of difference, Catalina took us to a place just over this little hill right here. So there's an arc where it could be.
Unfortunately, we have just under 100,000 service members still missing. 100,000 of them. And there are about 90 people in our organization who do this. And so we are the only ones who go out and find them, from Czechoslovakia to Papua New Guinea to Palau to Vietnam, everywhere.
I think they have a sense that we're straight shooters and they'll listen to what we say. We build our case, we present it to JPAC, and then they have to make a decision as to whether they invest or not the resources necessary to do that. Now, they've done that quite a number of times.
I want to focus where she indicated and just dig that area and then go down there.
Yeah, well, what I thought I'd do is
It's been 10 years we were looking for Pit 24.
As long as it looked and as hard as it looked, it's like, they're not going to find it.
That first year we did trolling for sharks, which is where we put some ropes across the side of the boat, and rather than just scuba dive over it, we went around a bunch of coral heads with us being dragged by the boat so we could cover more terrain. And
stop.
I can't quite tell from a distance, but they're very symmetrical.
That's
Or is it just
plum
coral
shade. That's a plum shade.
I thought I'd make it interesting.
This is a propeller that we found in 1993, but we've never been able to find the rest of the plane. And in a few years, this propeller is probably going to be totally beneath the coral head.
I found somebody which has been fishing on the area. Then he told me there is an airplane over there.
One giant step, bent prop.
What a lucky day! I saw huge. I thought it's a rock or something, but it's not the rock. It's huge and long. So when I got there, it's a tail and the body. If you were down there, you hear them shouting inside the water. I know those guys very happy.
Good job, Joe! 10 years. 10 years? Yes. It makes all those days of diving in silty water, and
I'd pay that price.
I'd pay that price again. Damn right. This is great.
That was just like a, a dream come true that wasn't ever going to, Somebody's out there found this thing, 60 years later.
In the back of our mind, I mean, we're school teachers. In the back of our mind, we said we'd never have the money to make a trip like that. Hi, I'm Nancy. We finally told ourselves, we can't pass this up.
My job's not that important. They can get along without me for a little while. The money is, we can find that.
We just bit the bullet and pulled out the credit card and went. And hello, is Ali?
Now, making me a scuba diver, that might have been something else.
Yeah, you ready?
Were you a good student?
It was terrible. It was terrible.
Had a college student, a high school student. It was me.
Well,
They said the old fogey's gonna drag us down.
They kept saying, we'll have a little fun dive and let you rest up the first day, and then we'll go dive on the plane. Well, that wasn't a fun dive. That was a check dive to see if I could really do it, and it's going to take me out. I knew what this did. I'd been 25 feet down in the water, 2 weeks ago. That's my diving experience. They decided I wasn't very good, but I was good enough they'd take me anyway, so that afternoon we dove on the plane. So. Joe just grabbed hold of me and held on. And I kind of went wherever he told me to. Needless to say, I was more interested in the tail section. He was a tail gunner. There was a hole sort of under the bottom, and I tried to get in as far as I could, and one time Joe pulls me out. He says, you can't go any further. And to think that after all these years and all of not knowing, I may be within 10 or 15 feet of where he died. And to touch the plane that he died in, and to think that probably right over there somewhere were his remains, and that's pretty, I don't know what the word is, but it grabs your old heart and twists it in knots, I'll tell you that. And we had a little conversation. Nobody else's business, but we had a little conversation in there. And I don't know how to describe it except that it's like we made contact. It's like I got to say some things to my dad that I'd never said before.
All of this has brought a form of closure for me. He became a real person, not just a memory.
The truth is, this information will then be passed on to my daughter and to my grandchildren.
I don't like that closure word. It's like you close it and forget it to me, but it's answered a lot of questions. Just want to do all the DNA and make sure we know what we think we know.
Well, I just sort of feel like we're bringing him home. It means a lot that Don has not been forgotten.
I develop a relationship with the people I'm searching for, and I talk to them all the time. Many, many times when we're searching and we're frustrated, I'll look out over the boat into the water, or I'll look down the hill in the jungle, and I'll just say, I just want you to know we're looking for you, and we're going to do everything we can to find you. That is undoubtedly the crash of a Corsair. I'm almost sure this is Quintus's plane. I mean, there's just nothing else it could be.
Yeah.
I think we should call Quintus.
How about we call Jim? And I'd say,
Jim.
I'd say it doesn't matter what time it is.
It was early one morning here in Houston, Texas, and the phone rang.
So it's 2 something central.
So hello, it says, Jim, this is Pat. I'm in Palau.
I'm in Palau, and we're calling to tell you we found your father's plane. That, again, makes these trips exciting. You never know what you're going to find.